Hello and welcome to this webinar on AP 2019 resources and all of the new tools and supports that are available for AP teachers and students for the 2019-20 school year. My name is Claire Lorenz. I'm the Senior Director of AP Instruction here at the College Board, and we want to thank the Michigan Association of Secondary School Principals for their partnership in recording this webinar today and getting it out to teachers. Without further ado, we'll give you a sense of what we'll be covering in this webinar. The first part of our agenda is going to really focus on the course and exam description. Those are the AP binders that you might have been using so far this school year. And we'll go through very specific parts of the CED, or course and exam description, so that you have a sense of the main features of what the CED has to offer. Then we'll transition to our online tools and talk a little bit about formative and summative assessments, including the topic questions and progress checks, and show you how all of those things come together for teacher use and student use in AP Classroom. A little later in the presentation, we'll transition to AP Classroom directly, and you'll be able to see live time how to do things like assign some of these assessments to your students and look at the real-time data that will be available. So we'll start with an overview of the course and exam descriptions and also, in general, the resources and its supports that are available. So you can see all of this available on the right and a couple of definitions here on the left about what these actually are. I want to point out that it is the first set here, the course at a glance and unit guides, that are contained within the AP course and exam description. They're in the binder that you have for your course. But all of the rest of these things are part of our digital suite of tools, and they're all found on AP Classroom, accessed through MyAP. So if you have not yet signed into MyAP or used the resources in AP Classroom, you'll note here that you're kind of missing out on some of the most robust tools that we have to offer for the 2019-2020 school year. And we'll go into each one of these things so you get a sense of how and when you would use them in your classroom. So we'll start with the CED. And if you've taught AP for a little bit of time, you may have known that your course has had a CED in the past, and it may have looked like any of the four on the right, depending on when your course came into existence. So some courses that haven't been changed in a little bit of time look like the course and exam description here in the lower left corner. These are the old black and white acorn books, as we affectionately used to call them. And then as we introduced more courses and then also redesign some of our courses, the CEDs start to get a little bit more robust and change shape in some way. They've always included the information that you see on the left, including nuts and bolts about AP, the course, the exam. But what we've done now is we've brought all of our AP course and exam descriptions up to the same level, and we've created these binders across every single course, and they now contain specific features that did not exist before, like the course at a glance, unit guides, and things like instructional approaches. And we'll dive into each one of these pieces separately in the slides to come. Here is our complete family of the binders that exist. So if you teach one of our math or computer science courses, those are the three up in the left-hand corner. CSP, or Computer Science Principles, does not yet have a binder, but it will be coming shortly. The next set of courses here are our art courses, and we have art history, our three art and design courses, and music theory. Our two English courses here, our family of science courses, our family of history and social science courses, and then our world language and culture courses. Every teacher should have a copy of the course and exam description. You can get one for free. If you've not yet ordered one, you can go to the website you see here on the left, www.collegeboard.org/CED. It's free. We'll ship it to your school or your home address, so long as you are a course authorized teacher for that subject. If you've ordered your CED but it hasn't arrived to you for some reason, please send an email to the address you see here, cedsupport@collegeboard.org, and our customer service representatives will help you track down your order and shipment. In the meantime, know that there are digital versions of our course and exam descriptions online available for you to download. I'll give you a couple of instructions here in case you want to download as you're following along with this webinar. Very simple, you go to apcentral.collegeboard.org. That's our public site for everything AP. And then from the very top set of drop-down menus, you'll scroll over to AP Courses and Exams and choose the first item in that drop-down list that says Course and Exam Pages. You'll then be shown a family of our courses that I show you on the previous screen. I picked one here to use as a demonstration, AP Biology, so I scrolled down to Sciences and selected Biology. And then you'll be taken to the biology course homepage where you'll see a large tile on the left side of the screen to download the course and exam description. This will bring a digital version of the CED up in your browser. It will probably open in a separate window. You can choose to either interact with it from that window or you can download a copy to your desktop. So really quickly, that's go to AP Central, select Course and Exam Pages, find your AP course that you teach, and then download the course and exam description. You'll know you'll have landed in the right place if you see a course homepage that looks like this and you're looking at this tile on the left-hand side that encourages you to download the CED. But just in case, as we're going through this today, you find that there are maybe specific nuances to your course that we don't quite touch on, we want you to know that there are course-specific walkthroughs of the CED that you can go through on your own time. So if you find today that I'm using a particular course as an example that doesn't align as well to yours, you can still know that there are resources available to help you navigate your course's CED. You can access them by hitting the course button here. You'll be brought to a page that looks something like this, where there's a blue box about important updates. But as you scroll down past the course overview, there's a blue line, and the first thing past the blue line is an entry for a specific course and exam description walkthrough. And if you click this, you'll find yourself interacting with a walkthrough tutorial that is self-paced. You can go as quickly as you want or as slow as you want. It reacts to your click-throughs and will literally take you through every element of the CED in case you want to learn more about your course-specific CED. Every course that has a binder has one of these walkthroughs, so please know that it's there to help you navigate your binder. So now on to the meat and potatoes of what's in the CED. The CED was created to really highlight the hallmarks of good instruction. And when we think about the hallmarks of good instruction, we think of two categories. We think of content and skill. So we'll first look at content. When we talk about content, we talk about teaching for understanding. And what we mean here is that we want students to develop some long-term takeaways about the course and not just a list of vocabulary words or formulas or processes. We really want them to understand why it's important that they study this and what applications it has to the everyday world. I used to teach calculus, and one of the things that I like to do is ask adults if they took calculus while they were in college and what they remember from it. And usually we get a few brave souls that will admit that they took the course, but that the only thing that they remember is the word derivative. And that, as a high school teacher, was not what I wanted my students to remember. I wanted them to remember what calculus was and what it was used for. And that's really what we're going for here, is that we want students to have a good understanding of what it is that are the big picture takeaways for the course. And when you're thinking about this, it's helpful to kind of put yourself in the mindset of, what do you want students to remember about your course 5 years from now? In other words, what do you want them to understand about your course's content versus just know? It's one thing to know that the Spanish Armada sunk in 1588, something I remember about world history, and it's another thing to understand about the overall effects of imperialism in world culture. Right beside content, we have the idea of teaching for transfer or teaching for skill. And the thing that we have to recognize as AP teachers is that if we teach students content, they have to be able to apply that content to different scenarios, and they have to be able to do different things with that content. So we want to make sure that the skills that go alongside of the course content are modeled appropriately in our classes, and they we know will help prepare students for the AP exam and sequent courses that come after this introductory level college course. We also know that students are going to need specific and repeated opportunities to practice skills in different contexts throughout the course. So it's one thing when you teach content, you usually teach it once and you move on. You teach about a particular historical figure usually once, and then you move on. If I taught U.S. history, perhaps I teach about the Articles of Confederation over 1 or 2 class periods, and then I move on. But with skill, I want to teach students how to apply it in multiple different contexts. So I'm going to need to teach them how to make a historical claim in different points throughout the course. It's not a one and done, and we want to make sure that we provide those opportunities. We know this is tough for you to do as a teacher, and so what the CED does is it creates these opportunities for you already so that you can focus more on instructional delivery versus just instructional design. So we've taken the design element away out of it for you. You've done that hard work so that all you have to do is worry about how you are going to get that information to your students. With that, we're going to show you one of the first newer features of the course and exam description. It's called Course at a Glance. I'm going to use biology as an example here, but most of you will have the same type of document in your course and exam description. So in biology, we're on pages 22 to 24, but it's relatively around the same range of pages for most courses. Biology has 8 units. I'm only showing 7 on the screen here, but that's just because that's what fits. But let's talk a little bit about what's on this page, because there's a lot of information that if you understand how it works here, it will make understanding the rest of the CED super helpful and easier. So you'll see a series of columns, and each column represents one of the units of the course. So what we've done is we've broken down the course into chunks of content called units, and what that will do is allow us to have points for formative assessments throughout the course at the end of each unit, and we'll talk about those more in a bit. Every course unit has a unit number and a unit title. There are also two sets of numbers typically underneath this course title. The first one represents the number of class periods that we think it will take you to cover the course content and skills of that unit. Now, we had to define a class period in a specific way. So if you actually read the blurb on the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see that pacing is based on a 45-minute class period, meeting 5 days each week for a full academic year for this course. In some courses, it may be for a semester. In other cases, we may have given you a semester pacing and a year-long pacing. So you'll want to read that blurb on the left-hand side. We realize this is not everyone's schedule. So some folks are on an A-B schedule, some folks are on some sort of different block schedule, an A through G rotating drop block schedule, whatever it is that your school does, just know that that is okay, and we're just trying to provide an idea of how long it might take here, and you may have to do some math to figure out how long that means for you. The second set of numbers is the what we call the emphasis, or it's the percentage of the multiple choice section of the AP exam that comes from the content of this unit. So you have a sense of how much of this course content will be shown on the exam, so that in case you have to make strategic decisions about where you spend the most of your time, you'll be able to do that with some level of transparency. Underneath that, you'll see a series of tiles. All of these tiles are called topics in our course and exam description. A topic has several parts. It has a number, usually indicates the number topic it is in a particular unit. So this is the first topic in Unit 1. It has a topic title, which gives you a sense of the content that is being covered in that particular topic. And then you'll see two boxes over here on the left. Let's talk about what these boxes do. One of them is has a color and a number in it, and this box actually refers to the course skill categories. Depending on your course, they may be called different things. You can see here in biology, they're called science practices. Chemistry, physics, environmental science, they're also called science practices. Math, like calculus, will be mathematical practices. We have historical thinking skills. We have computational thinking practices. And still in some subjects, we have just course skills. So just know that I will use the term course skills frequently throughout this presentation. They may have specific names depending on the course, but they all basically refer to the same thing. So one of the things that we've done here, as I mentioned in the previous slides, is we've taken away the burden of teachers having to figure out when are they going to work with students on ideas like visual representations, and when should you practice that. We've not only indicated where you should do that, but we've done it in a way where students are getting repeated opportunities to practice that skill. So this skill is going to come up in Unit 1. It may come up in Unit 2, Unit 6, and Unit 7, so that you can see students will get exposure to it at the beginning of the course, near the end of the course. It's not a one and done. So students will be working with visual representation in multiple different contexts. We call this spiraling our course skills, meaning they are repeated throughout the course to provide that ample practice we know students need. Not to diminish the importance of content, the black box that's here refers to one of our course big ideas. And some of our courses, like the histories, these may be called things like themes, but the idea here is the same. These are the overall themes or threads that run throughout the course and are repeated throughout the course. And so you can see that those also spiral. This idea of systems interactions comes up in Unit 1, in Unit 3, in Unit 5, in Unit 7. And we've done this so that students aren't learning content in a silo. We know that The AP exam often asks students to make comparisons from one part of the course to another part of the course, and students will be able to do that if they know which pieces of content are connected by some common thread in terms of content. So these big ideas allow students to make connections throughout the course. At the bottom of each column, you'll see reference to that formative assessment or checkpoint that I referred to earlier. They're called personal progress checks, and they're made to assess student understanding of content and skill that is covered in that unit. They consist of multiple choice questions and free response questions, and we've outlined for teachers what they can expect to see here. We've also done and created these in a way that meet students where they are. We know that teachers really like to expose their students to AP exam type questions early on in the school year, but often when you only finish a unit or two of course content, they may not be ready to tackle a full-fledged free response question. And so you find yourself trying to figure out which parts of questions are most appropriate for students to answer. So what we've done is we've actually created partial versions, which very much mimic the spirit of that type of task on the exam, but only contain the parts of the task that students would be expected to be able to do at that point during the school year. So they're meant to prepare students for more complex, full questions that they'll encounter on the AP exam, but not expect too much of them as to diminish their confidence along the way. So the idea with formative assessments is to meet students where they are and again provide that level of support so that as they learn more, they can expand what it is that they can show that they can do on the exam. To go back to this core skills for a minute, and as a reminder, those are these colored boxes that you see alongside the topics. I want to remind you that these represent the core skill categories. So you may be wondering, what is it about visual representations I'm expected to teach here? Well, these categories also show up on a chart that is right before the course at a glance. And you can see that we've created a full set of science practices for biology or course skills for any of our courses. And that blue number 2 of visual representations is really the name of the full category. But underneath that, you can see how we've parsed this category into 4 separate skills. Everything from describing a biological concept represented visually to having students be able to represent their own biological models using a variety of methods. So we know that students will have to do all of these things on the exam. But what we've done is we've also scaffolded the use of the skills throughout the course so that students aren't doing the more complex skills earlier on in the course before they've learned the more foundational skills of that category. So not only are we repeating or spiraling this category throughout the course, we are scaffolding the skill category so that we encounter a progression of skills so that students will be doing 2A before they do 2B, before they do 2C, before they do 2D, so that we can build toward the more complex skills. So spiraling and scaffolding. So we've talked a lot about what's on this course at a glance. So if you remember nothing else, there are 7 key points that you should remember here. One is that the course at a glance gives you a sequence. With the units, it is basically suggesting an order in which you can teach the course. It's also giving you a pacing. How long should you spend in each unit? It gives you that emphasis, how much of the multiple choice section of the AP exam would come from a particular unit. You see that spiraling repetition of course skills. We talked about the scaffolding, how we will do more foundational skills earlier on and move toward more complex skills as we go through the course. And then there are those means to check for student understanding. We talked about unit checks, which is number 7, but we will also be talking about daily checks, meaning not only are there progress checks to assess student understanding after the whole unit is complete, but we also have sets of questions that can test student understanding of each concept and skill, or each topic and skill, as we move throughout the course. And we'll get to those in a few. Because I know there are teachers of a variety of different subjects watching this, I wanted to show you one other example. This is English literature. And English literature is a little bit different because we know that in a lot of cases, you're using texts to teach certain skills. So in a lot of cases, your content and your skills are very much intertwined. And so what you're going to see here is the same idea, the same structure. You're going to see all of the units have numbers and titles. You'll see a number of class periods. You'll notice here we don't see an emphasis because there isn't an emphasis by genre, there is an emphasis by skill. And then you'll start to see these topics, but the topics are actually a list of skills. And this skill comes from this purple skill category, which is explain the function of character. If you read the skill category, you'll see very quickly how this skill fits within that category. But the same idea here is that the category spirals throughout the course. We get multiple repetitions. We also have these big ideas about character, about setting, about figurative language, and those also spiral throughout the course. You'll see them come up in several different units. We still have the notion of the progress check and a concentration on partial versions, especially earlier on in the course when students haven't learned as many skills thus yet. And those skill categories fall back to one of our full lists of skills here. And so you can see this long list of character or in the skill category, and there was that 1A skill that was there. One of the nice things about English literature is because the content and skill are so intertwined, we've actually indicated for you where else this particular skill will come up throughout the course. And you can see there's a lot of practice with 1A because students cannot do the rest of these if they don't have a good understanding of 1A. In fact, I'm not even going to see the next skill in this category until I hit Unit 3. And I won't see 1C until I hit Unit 4. So you can see there's a lot of focus on this more foundational skill earlier on in the course, and then I won't see 1E at least until Unit 6, and then I'll see it again in Unit 9. So for English folks, I know yours is a little bit different, and so I wanted to show you this. World languages, your course will work in a similar fashion. English language also follows the same type of pattern as English literature. So just a reminder, this is what students should be able to do while studying literary works in the course. All skills in all of our courses form the basis of tasks students are asked to perform on the AP exam. We want to make sure we give these students multiple opportunities to practice the skills so that they can develop mastery. It is that repetition that we've provided for you so that you don't have to worry about that element of instructional design. So those are before we even hit the unit guides in the course and exam description. So very early on, we talked about how the course at a glance and the unit guides are really the heart of the binders that you all have. So I wanted to show you a couple more things that are really helpful in the unit guide. So I've gone back to biology here. This is the unit guide for Unit 2. This first page is called the unit opener, and there's a couple of things that you should note here. I know it seems like a lot of text on a page, and you might be tempted to just kind of flip to the real content, but there's a lot of helpful information here, so let me summarize for you. There's one paragraph typically on developing understanding. And if you remember, we talked about teaching for understanding or teaching for content early on. And that's what this paragraph is about. It situates the content of the unit within the rest of the course and tells you how it might be related to what has come before and what is yet to come in the course. Then we've taken the big ideas that come up in this course and listed them for you. We've also given you some essential questions that you might want to use when getting students to really hone in on what they will be learning in this unit. We have that piece of building and teaching for transfer, or as building the core skills. So several skills will come up in this unit, and we're telling you here why these skills are important and why they are associated with this particular set of content. And then finally, we have a section on preparing for the AP exam. We know that there are certain things that come up year after year that the chief reader will bring up on the chief reader report that's published in the fall after every exam, and write about what students did well and what students struggled with. And this is meant to kind of remind teachers where they might want to spend a lot of time with students to make sure they don't fall into those same traps. Think of this as the kind of, before you leave this unit, you should make sure students are able to do these things, and this will give you a sense of how the unit content and skills are tested on the exam. The next thing is the unit at a glance. So before we saw the course at a glance, and we had all these topics, but this course at a glance column actually is then transformed in the unit guides to a full page unit at a glance. And the tiles that were in this column that represented the topics are now rows in the unit at a glance table. So what is this table telling you that the course at a glance didn't? Well, it will still tell you the content based on the name of the topic. But what it does here is that instead of giving you just the purple skill or the skill category, it's telling you which of those sub-skills within that category you should actually teach alongside this content. So this suggested skill traces all the way back to the science practices chart we looked at earlier, and tells you exactly which of the skills in that course category of course skill category you should focus on. And it should come as no surprise that if we're in Unit 2 still, earlier on in the course, that we're still focusing on some of the earlier skills here, like 1A, describing certain biological concepts or processes. So again, just as a reminder, this unit at a glance shows the topics, suggested skills, tells you the overall class periods for this unit. This skill is part of the larger skill category that spirals throughout the course. And you'll see in a bit, when we talk about the formative assessments in more depth, that the skill and the content together are going to form the basis of those formative assessment questions. And then we've left the last column blank so that you as a teacher, as you're planning, can figure out how you want to spend your class time. Where you choose to spend more time, maybe where someone else chooses to spend less time, and that's okay. We know you know your students best and want to attend to their individual needs, so feel free to fill in this column as you see fit. I'm going to give us a little sneak preview of AP Classroom. So if you've been on AP Classroom, hopefully you'll notice that the structure and coloring and format of AP Classroom is very similar to what what teachers have seen in their course and exam description. So if I look at that unit at a glance that we just talked about, you can see very clearly that the name of the topic directly corresponds to what you're seeing on AP Classroom. And if there is a skill that is mentioned, not only is the same skill reference, but it's used the same nomenclature, the same coloring, and there are actually features on AP Classroom that would allow you to click here and bring up the full name of the skill so that you don't have to have the binder next to you. You can also click on the unit guide link that's here and it will bring up the digital version of the unit guide so that you don't, again, have to worry about having the binder with you at all points in time. So hopefully you'll see the direct correspondence between the course and exam description and AP Classroom, which is why we wanted to do this grounding of why the binder is so important before you get into the digital tools. Moving on in the unit guide, one of my favorite parts of the CED is this list of sample instructional activities. So even if you've been teaching the course for a while, you may be looking for new tools for your teaching tool belt. I always wanted to know how teachers were teaching a particular topic that I thought was more difficult to teach my students. I'd try an activity maybe one year, it didn't work as well as I wanted to, and so I'd be on the hunt for a new activity. And what we've done here is for a certain select number of topics is we've provided you with an optional sample instructional activity that can help you tie together the content and skill of a particular topic. This is not a full lesson plan. This is not something that contains handouts. It's literally just a short blurb about something you could set up or do with your class in order to tackle content and skill in a particular topic. You can feel free to use them, not use them, change them in some way. Maybe it gives you an idea for something better. It is totally up to you what you want to do with them, but really we hope it gives you a set of ideas. And all of the activities utilize a common instructional strategy, and all of these strategies are actually listed in the Instructional Approaches section of our CED, which I will show you in a couple of slides. Some of these you may have heard of before. You'll see things like Think, Pair, Share and Gallery Walk, but there are other things here as well that, there are other things here as well. There are other things here as well that may be a little bit more off the beaten path, like inside, outside circle, 1 minute essay, calculation, miscalculation. There are a whole bunch of different types of instructional strategies. You may actually call them something else, but it's not really about what you call them. It's really about how you use them to engage students with course content and practice course skills. Finally, to end the unit guides, you will see a series of what we call topic pages, and this is really the core content of what needs to be told, what needs to be taught to students for each topic. So, what's on this page? The topic itself is named, again, it's the same name that you would see on the course at a glance, on the unit at a glance, so you will have seen reference to this before. The topic may take anywhere from slightly less than a single class period to several class periods for you to teach, and that really depends on the needs of your students, how much content there is, how many skills there are, what you want to do with this topic. Maybe you think that this is a great portion of your course to do some sort of project, in which case you're going to spend more time here. Or maybe your students have had access to this content in a prerequisite course, and so you want to spend less time here. That's all up to you, depending on the background your students are coming in with. Required course content is listed in the middle of the page in a blue box. So if it's in a blue box, it is fair game to be tested on the exam. The skill is in the upper corner. The skill is meant to be taught alongside the content of the topic. Then there's usually a list of available resources. So if we have something on AP Central that might be helpful for you, or there's, like in science, reference to a lab. In some of our courses, they've actually referenced specific threads in the teacher community, just to kind of get you a little bit more support on what you might use to teach this topic. And then illustrative examples. The thing about illustrative examples and why they're in the margin versus the center of the page is that these are suggested contexts in which you can teach the course content that is in the blue box. So if you're looking for an example of what's being presented there, you can use any of the examples that are listed as illustrative, but it does not necessarily mean that that illustrative example will be tested on the exam. It is just a context through which you can present the content. A couple of other things here in terms of terminology. Essential knowledge, some courses call this something different. In our history courses, you'll see historical developments, but these are the nuts and bolts of what students must know, right? These are the facts, the figures, the people, the definitions, the formulas, the processes, etc. The learning objective is what students have to do with that knowledge. So in this case, students have to explain a connection between two things, right? Those things are in the essential knowledge. The enduring understanding is that long-term key takeaway that we talked about students having, what you want them to understand. It will typically come across as a fact to you because you have content knowledge in this area, but we say it's an enduring understanding because it's something that students have to earn over time. It's not going to be something that's readily apparent to them until they've had the opportunity to learn the content and engage with it fully. And then the skill is what students must be able to do within the context of the learning objective. We often get asked what's the difference between a skill and a learning objective since they both start with a verb. And the answer there is that the learning objective is explicitly tied to the course content and the essential knowledge, but the skill is almost content agnostic, meaning it can be applied in multiple different contexts and kind of transcends the content of any specific individual topic. So know that a skill can be applied in multiple different contexts, whereas a learning objective is explicitly tied to the knowledge it is linked to. I'll go through this page really quickly. Just a couple of things to think about when you're trying to figure out how to pace your course. So you can see here on the right, I've actually filled this column in to be a somewhat, a little bit of help. And just some things to consider here. I want to look at the number of class periods that are recommended total, and then how many topics are in the unit. I want to figure out if there are enough class periods to allot 1 day of instruction for each topic and whether any are left over. So I can see here there's 11 to 13 class periods recommended. There are 11 topics in the unit. So if I wanted to use the minimum number of class days, because I want to save all my extra days for review later on in the school year, I would have to teach each one of these topics within a singular class period. Again, this is assuming a 45-minute class period that meets every day, 5 days a week for the entire academic year. But if I was okay with using the maximum amount of class periods here, I would have 2 extra days to play with. And I may decide that topic 2.3 needs an extra class day and topic 2.5 needs an extra class day. Well, how do I figure out where should I spend my extra 2 class days? Well, I may look at which topics have more than one skill associated with them. So 2.3 had 2 skills associated with it. Both of them happen to be mathematical skills. And if I'm teaching this to a group of students who may find math challenging in some way, I may want to spend more time here. You can see here there's a lab skill 3D associated here, which means I probably I'm going to be doing a lab alongside this particular topic. So that automatically says to me I might need more than 1 day here, but these are a little bit more complex skills and I might need more time. I'm also going to want to look at content. Which topics have the most essential knowledge statements and learning objectives. If I go back to that topic 2.3, I can see that there's a lot of formulas here that students have to be familiar with, and an understanding of surface area and volume. That may be challenging for some students, and I may want to go back and spend more time here. I can see that actually spilled on to the next page. There's a lot of essential knowledge statements here, so this may be a candidate for where I spend more time. And then also, if you've taught the course before, you know where students get stuck, and so you're automatically going to want to spend more time on those more challenging topics that are either difficult for students to learn, or maybe you find difficulty to teach for whatever reason. And then as a reminder, you're going to want to leave some time to assign the personal progress check, and perhaps even review. You can see I have 2 class periods listed here. That's probably because I want to give some of it in class and then spend maybe a class period reviewing. You'll want to work backwards based on the number of class periods you have available to you. So it might be a good exercise to kind of plan out your whole year and figure out where you have extra time to spare and where you may want to spend more time. I'll go through really quickly that English example, just so you know, it works the same exact way. Your course at a glance becomes a unit overview. It's not called a unit at a glance, it's called a unit overview. We've done that because it takes a couple of pages. It's not just a singular page. But you're going to still see that the tile refers to a row in the unit overview chart. You're going to see the content. You're going to see the skill that are very intertwined. You're going to see that that skill goes back to that skill chart. And again, it's the same connections here. Because in English literature, English language, Spanish literature, Latin, or other or language and culture courses, we know that you're using a lot of texts that we've not prescribed because we wanted to have you maintain that flexibility. You won't see these litany of topic pages. You will see, however, an instructional planning page that allows you to kind of pick a literary selection and figure out what skills you're going to teach through that literary selection. So you would use a page like this to plan instruction and pacing. And there are notes on it at the top. One of them reminds teachers to regularly integrate composition skills when teaching literary analysis, and that you should think about selecting texts and tasks that best facilitate students' learning of the required skills and content for the unit. But we also know that maybe teachers don't think in this linear format, and so you're free to use your own type of instructional planning page. I'm going to show you a snippet of one right now. It'll look a little bit complex at first, but I'll walk you through it. So this was a teacher who was planning how they were going to teach the first 2 skills in Unit 1, and she has listed some possible texts that she might use here, all of which fall into the category of short fiction. She listed which essential knowledge statements she's going to cover from each one of these skills, and then kind of put a driving question that she wanted to tackle when using this text to cover these skills, and then some sort of kind of sample instructional activity she would do to kind of be able to answer this topic, a question, and then get at this particular skill. A note to our language teachers is that you don't necessarily have to teach the skills in order in a unit, but we are encouraging you to keep the unit skills together in some way because the personal progress checks will focus on the skills that are listed in each unit. English and languages also still have optional instructional activities. You can read some of them here. You can still feel free to modify them in some way, and those will also be given in the Instructional Approaches section. Speaking of, really quickly, Instructional Approaches is its own section of the CED, is not part of the unit guide, but is something that's fairly new for most of our courses. You'll see guidance for selecting and using course materials. It's not meant to be a prescriptive list, but just things you should think about when choosing textbooks, primary sources, secondary sources, nonfiction texts, technology if your course requires it, lab equipment if your course requires it. Just some guidance and questions to consider. If your course has something very specific to it, like inquiry instruction for science or civics education for government and politics, you may see emphasis of those types of things here. Then you'll see that list of instructional strategies. These usually take up several pages, and you'll be able to see the name of the strategy, how we've defined it, what we think its purpose is, and then yet another example that is course specific that you can feel free to adapt or use in your course. So again, more tools for you to add to your tool belt. And then because we know skill instruction can be either new for teachers or more difficult for teachers, we've actually expanded our Instructional Approaches section to focus on the skills themselves, and we've listed each individual sub-skill of the skill category and what that would entail students doing, what questions you might want to ask them to ensure that they've mastered this skill, yet another sample activity that you might engage students in order to practice this skill, and then other instructional strategies you may use. And then there's the exam information. The exam information contains a lot of information that has always been in the CED, so the exam overview, number of questions, exam weighting, timing, etc. But we've also added a section on how student learning is assessed on the AP exam that focuses a lot on skills. So if you're sitting there and saying, you hear me talking a lot about skills, but where are those actually tested on the exam, we've actually spent some time to outline for you how particular skill categories are assessed on the multiple choice section and the free response section of the exam. We've given you a list of task verbs. So these are course specific. So they are defined as they would be for your particular subject area. But if your students are having trouble distinguishing describe from explain or justify from verify, those definitions are available to you and to them through this chart. It is what we mean for students to be able to demonstrate when we use that word on the AP exam. So if we say evaluate, that has a very particular meaning, and we know that it has a particular meaning depending on the course that you're in. Evaluate for history and English teachers means something totally different than it does for, let's say, calculus teachers. So know that we've taken all of that into account, and hopefully you'll find this page useful for your students. And then finally, we also have the sample exam questions with answer key. We know that teachers always like to use these questions with their students and look at them, but I would encourage you to pay some attention to the last page that actually gives the alignment to the course framework. So in other words, not only have we given you the answer, but we've told you what skill it aligns to and what learning objective it aligns to and what unit it came from. So if you're wondering to yourself, what does skill 1A actually look like in a question, you can go to this multiple choice question 1 in the course and exam description and actually see how that skill is manifested in an assessment item. So we did that here for a reason, so that you would get a better sense of how the skill and the content play out together on the exam.